you ever looked inside of a lost and found box or a lost and found section, maybe at your school or at the church or a camp you went to? I love the weird, random things that people leave behind that end up in the lost and found section. Keys, books, toys, sunglasses, sometimes a random dirty sock. You never know exactly what you're going to find in a lost and found box. And there's a ton of reasons why people lose things. Sometimes we lose things because we're distracted. Sometimes it's because we're being careless. Sometimes we're just overwhelmed with life and we lose track of the things that are around us. But there's another reason I think that we lose something and maybe it stays lost. And that's that we didn't really value it. Imagine that like cheap pair of sunglasses that you bought and you took to camp with you and you left them behind. Well, you probably could have found them if you looked a little harder. But a lot of times we don't bother to do that because we don't put the value on those things. So we don't take our time and energy to find them. So that pair of sunglasses or that random dirty sock sits in the bottom of a box somewhere until someone else has to throw it away because we've decided that it's not worth our time and energy. We treat it as something that's disposable, as garbage. So how do you determine something's worth, something's value? This is especially important when we think about people and ourselves. So what determines our value? Is it something that we can just calculate, we can add up? I mean, most of us probably wouldn't sit around and go, well, here's what I'm worth. Let me look at my clothes. I spent $25 on the shirt and $75 on these jeans and $100 on these shoes. So let me add that up. And I've got the $800 phone. I really wanted the $1,200 phone, but I only got the $800 phone because that's all my parents would spring for. And I've got this game system instead of this one, and I really wanted these accessories and these earbuds and this technology. So let me add up. Is that how we calculate our value? Maybe it's not like the material possessions you have, but it's the resources you have access to. Like, what does your Chick-fil-A and Starbucks budget look like? Is that how you determine your value? Or maybe it's like intrinsic things about who you are, your abilities, your talents. Some of us, we look at ourselves and we're like, I have all of these amazing things and my potential is so unlimited. Others of us, we look at the negative things and we start saying, well, I'm not as good at this thing as that other person, and I don't have as many friends and followers and social media likes as these other people. So we start taking away from our value because of these things. And I think that it's really important that we take time to challenge the way we value ourselves and other people. Because we can't calculate our value and our worth based on these type of shallow things. And most of us would probably never take a dry erase board or pop out the calculators on our phone and start adding these things up. But we do subconsciously value ourselves and other people based on these kind of characteristics. And we have to take a critical look at how we define value, because the way we think of value, especially when it comes to people, affects how we treat ourselves and how we treat others. Through this series, we're looking at one chapter from Luke chapter 15. And in this chapter, Jesus tells a series of stories about things that were lost and then were found. And these stories, they're not historical stories, they're parables, which means that they're stories that Jesus used to teach us something, to illustrate a spiritual point that he wants us to understand. And we need to explore the context, the background for how these stories were told by Jesus and who he was telling them to, if we're really going to understand their full context. See, Jesus shared these stories in Luke chapter 15 with a group of people called the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were religious leaders, and they were super focused on following the hundreds of religious laws that are found in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. And these laws were important. There was nothing wrong with these laws. They were just so focused on following them down to the detail that they began to think that their value came from these laws. These laws that were meant to keep us close to God, for them, were a way of keeping score. And they felt righteous, self-righteous. They felt arrogant about their relationship with God, and they began to be dismissive and sometimes even abusive of other people that they didn't think measured up. And because of this, they often came into conflict with Jesus, because Jesus would do things that challenged their way of thinking about value and thinking about these laws. Jesus, for instance, would hang out with people and associate with them, have meals with them that they considered unclean, sinners, that they thought brought their value down. But Jesus would just hang out with them. Jesus would also, on the Sabbath day, which was a holy religious day for them, he would heal people. And they felt that was breaking their law. So Jesus tells these stories in Luke chapter 15 to this group of religious leaders because he wants them to understand that they've missed the point of the law, that they've gotten some things wrong about themselves and about and about God. And the first story was told about a sheep that was lost. And the Pharisees needed to know that God wasn't angry or judgmental when someone wanders away. Instead, God finds us and carries us lovingly back because God notices when we're lost. So let's look at our second story. It's in Luke chapter 15, verses 8 through 10. And this is what it says. Jesus is speaking and he says, "Or what woman, if she has 10 silver coins and loses one of them, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search thoroughly until she finds it? Then when she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I had lost.' In the same way, I tell you, there is more joy in the presence of God's angels over one sinner who repents." See, the woman in the story lost one of her 10 coins. And we may be reading that and going, oh, what's the big deal? She lost a coin. But a coin had a lot of monetary value in this culture. In fact, this was worth about a day's wage for her. And so for her to lose this would have been financially devastating. And that explains why when she notices that it's missing, she tears apart the entire house till she finds it. And then when she finds it, she's so excited that she's found it. She celebrates this. And this isn't the first time we've talked about celebration in these lost and found parables. If you remember last week, the shepherd, when he found his lost sheep, he rejoices, but then he also invites his friends and neighbors to rejoice as well. And that's something these parables have in common. And what Jesus is trying to say here is that when someone comes to God for the first time, or when someone who is lost is found, that heaven rejoices over that fact. They're trying to teach us something about God and how God values us, but also about what we're supposed to do. See, in this parable, we see what it looks like when we've wandered off from God, that God values us enough to tear apart the entire house looking for us. And it's great to know that God values you, but the main takeaway of this parable for the Pharisees wasn't that God valued them, because they already felt that about themselves. They needed to know that God valued everyone as much as he valued them. The people that they overlooked, the people they dismissed, the people they were abusive toward, the people they judged because they didn't think they were holy enough, righteous enough, good enough. God loved them enough to tear apart the entire house looking for them. See, the Pharisees were convinced that these sinners were less valuable to God because they weren't as pure and as righteous as the Pharisees were. And they may have known the Hebrew Scriptures, but they forgot that the Scriptures point to God being a God of love. Like that woman who lost her coin, you need to know that Jesus values you and that Jesus values others. So what about you? What challenge does this story have for you today? Well, maybe you need to let God find you. Just like the woman in today's story, God is relentlessly chasing after you, wanting to know you and to be known by you, and wants you to be found again. Maybe for you, the thing that you need to take away is that you're feeling kind of worthless. And you're not really sure where your value comes from or that you even have some, but you need to hear this today. God values you exactly as you are, exactly where you are. That you are extremely valuable to God. So maybe the next step for you is that you need to ask God to let you see yourself as God sees you, to see yourself through Jesus' eyes. Maybe the thing that you need to hear from this story is that you need to stop treating other people like they're worthless. Because remember, Jesus told this story to a group of Pharisees specifically because they thought their value to God was determined by how good they were, how religious they were. And the people they thought were on the outside, they didn't have that value. And Jesus told this story so that they would know that he loved people deeply and that God chases after those who are lost. So how do you need to change your value system? Maybe you need to acknowledge that Jesus values you. You need to say, Jesus values me for who I am. Or maybe you need to acknowledge that Jesus values others.